In this tutorial, we're going to look at the updated if-else step in the workflows. What we'll do is show you where this step is, very briefly how it works. We'll look at a completed workflow of how it looks when you're using them. And then at the second half of this video, we'll go through step by step and actually build a workflow using the if-else condition step. So firstly, when you go to add a step in a workflow, you'll see right down the bottom, you have the if-else step of conditions, and that's what we're using in this tutorial. Now, conditions are made up of branches, segments, and conditions. So to better explain how conditions, branches, and segments work, I've got this illustration here which explains what happens. So when you put in an if-else condition step into your workflow, then the system is going to check that contact record to see various information about that contact as to which direction they should go in the workflow. Should they go down a particular branch or another branch? Now in this illustration, we've just got 2 branches. However, you can have as many branches as you like. So you could definitely have here branch A, branch B, and branch C, and so on. So the branch is ultimately where the flow is going to go. Is it going to go down branch A in this example, or is it going to go down branch B? Now, in order for the system to identify which branch should be selected for the contact, it's going to look at the segments that create that branch. And a segment is made up of conditions, okay? So looking at this in depth, we have branch A over here on the left. Now, for the system to decide whether branch A is to be selected, it needs to look at segment C. Now, the conditions of segment C are set up as condition X and or condition Y. So a condition might be something like the contact has a specific tag, the contact has a specific custom field, the contact has a specific status, or any number of other variables, which you'll see shortly when we actually build the workflow. Now, these conditions can be created as and or conditions, which means that if it's set to and, then for the segment to be true, we need to satisfy both condition X and Y. If you select or, then if X or Y is true, then it's going to satisfy segment C. Now, similarly, you can have more segments within a branch, and we see here we have segment D. And again, just like the conditions, the segments can be and or conditions. In other words, you could say that this person has to satisfy segment C and segment D, or you could have it set that they need to satisfy segment C or segment D in order to be selected for branch A. So that might sound a bit confusing. It'll look more clear when you have a look at the workflow in a moment. And then you can see in this case, before we leave the screen, we have branch B, and that has its own segment R, segment S here. It might be really simple. Your workflow might simply look like this, and you might not even have a segment S at all, if we showed you this. And segment R might even just have one condition. Okay, so conditions don't need to be complicated. This illustration was simply explaining how they work in depth. Now, going back to our actual workflow step, you can see how this works here. So when you create a branch, it will simply have a condition name up here, and then the branch name will say branch, and then you have your segments. So in here you can see you must have at least one condition. So you can select that. In this case, we could say contact details, and we could select tags, and the tag includes a specific tag. So let's say in this case, CBD, right? And now notice if you do this, it's going to create 2 branches automatically. It either has the condition or it doesn't. Now notice also it just says branch and it just says condition. So it's a good idea when you're naming your workflows to rename these steps so that they make sense. So for example, you could call this does the contact have the tag CBD question mark, and then this branch would be called yes. And if we save this, now we say, does the contact have the tag CBD? Yes, do this. None, then it will just end the workflow. So going back into this condition here, you can see the if-else step, you can see that you can add multiple conditions within the segment, and you've got this and or selector as discussed in the previous slide illustration. Plus, you can add additional segments. So if we got rid of this, we can add an additional segment, and that segment can be selected to and or. So if it's the or, for example, we see that if it's this segment here or it's this segment here, then it would proceed down that branch. Okay, so for example, you might say this segment is contact details and tags includes, and this time we might say Facebook. And then you might say an add condition and the date, time, current day of month is after the 2nd, for example. So the way this works is that for this segment to be satisfied, they need both of these conditions because we're using the and. Again, you'll see the and or selector just here. So that's how you use the condition step. And then finally, you've got the additional add branch, which adds another whole branch to it. So for example, here in this step, we can say, we can just go into contact details again. We can choose another tag, and we can say this is called bounced email, and save that. And now you see you've got this branch here, and then the none branch. Okay, so you're always going to have this none branch. If none of the branches are satisfied, then it will go down this string here, right? So there's always the possibility that won't meet any of the branches, and that's why that none branch will always be part of your condition. So that might be enough detail for you to understand how the if-else condition works.